Hello, good evening. I am going to share my screen here so I can start my presentation. So this is my presentation of my action research project, specifically just focusing on the data collection portion of the project and what I implemented this semester for my action research. So my research focus was the purpose of the study is to research, plan, implement, collect data, analyze the data, and determine if the implementation of physical fitness regimen for students that are not engaged in regular exercise will benefit, whether or not this will benefit their academic achievement. The research says that regular physical exercise does improve student self-efficacy, their psychosocial health and brain function. And therefore that then becomes a catalyst for academic growth. So we're examining that portion of it. I currently teach a physical fitness course at Osborne High School. Here are some of the demographics of Osborne High School. We have a very small white student population at Osborne, a very high Hispanic population at Osborne, and then very little of everything else with 30% Black students. In my class, especially the class in which this is research is being done, there's only one white student, there's 15 Black students and 16 Hispanic students. And interesting enough, all of my students are males. So that poses an interesting dynamic that this study only focuses on male students, and so that is one of the variables that we have to kind of consider as we do this study. So what is weight training? Weight training is a course that introduces weight training. It emphasizes strength development, proper lifting techniques, includes fitness concepts and those types of things, and promotes a healthy lifestyle. According to the state, this grading mechanism that we use is targeted towards appropriate grade level comprehension in the concepts and principles of fitness, motor skills, movement patterns, tactics, strategies, and that all contribute to a physically literate and active lifestyle. And so this is what the class is designed to do, to promote a healthy physical lifestyle, a healthy lifestyle that then will benefit students as they go forward. And so, as I said before, the point of this action research is to see whether or not weight training in particular, and the study of weight training and the implementation of a weight program for students, not only does it help them with their personal lives, but also it helps them with their academic growth as well. And whether or not this builds this level of self-efficacy inside of students, and then as a result of that self-efficacy, you see an improvement in their academic achievement. So we all teachers in Cobb County schools are in what you call Cobb collaborative communities, but what they essentially are professional learning committees. My professional learning committee only consists of 2 teachers that teach weight training at Osborne High School. Here are some of our roles. I serve as the lead of our committee, and then my co-teacher, Coach Pruitt, serves the role as the timekeeper, note taker, and scheduler. Collectively, we do all of the planning, all of the assessment decisions, all of the data collection and analysis, of that data. Currently right now, as much as we would like to make students and parents a part of the process of building the course and what foundations exist in the course, right now, students and parents are not consulted in that regard. But what are our committee goals that we've set forward? That we want to create we want to complete lifts, and we want kids to be able to complete lifts safely, properly, and we want to be able to facilitate and monitor progress in their strength development. So our planning when putting together the course all involves these things you see here. We research students' data. In particular with this research, we look to see how did the students perform, in particular the semester prior to them coming to weight training. How did they perform in their core academic classes before they were put into a physical fitness regimen? And we were going to use that data to compare to how they performed when they were in a semester where they were being challenged physically. So we identified students' current academic core class standing. We wanted to see how they already were doing in their courses, and we looked at that as well. We realized that we needed to unpack our own standards and be very concise about what our goals were and how we were going to grade students and how we were going to assess students. We also needed to determine students' their pre-existing feelings and beliefs on their abilities and their skill level and their overall self-confidence. What was their current level of self-efficacy? What was their current level of psychosocial health? And so we created survey items in order to try and determine that and collect that data. We decided to break down the standards into a more concise language so that students were very clear about what the objectives were. We condensed those standards and developed learning intentions from that. And then we decided, because weight training only has 5 standards, that these standards would be taught concurrently, that we would not have this progression where we teach standard 1 and then move to standard 2. All of our standards all run at the same time. We just simply focus our attention on one standard versus the other. And then we created our assessment tools. We would assess the students using formative assessments of just observation and direct instructional feedback through modeling and verbal instruction. We also had our rubric assessments that we use to determine their standard mastery, and then performance tasks. We will test the students' ability to complete lifts, their technique, as well as whether or not they are building strength as they go along in the class in this semester. Here is some of the data we collected off of the first survey. There was a series of 8 questions in this PowerPoint slide. We did not decide to put the questions, but the questions all spoke to the level of self-efficacy. These questions will be located in the appendix of the paper, in the appendix of the slide. And these are the numbers that generated how well each student, or what each student and how they answered each question. We repeated this. We did it in the beginning of the semester, then we did it again in the middle of the semester, and we have not collected the data towards the end of the semester. We haven't given the survey yet because, of course, we're still running. So we haven't collected that data. And what we essentially are hoping to see is that these numbers increase, that the agree and strongly agree begin to increase. As you can see, much less than half the class answered that they agreed or strongly agreed almost on every one of the survey items, which gives us some sense that our students don't have a strong level of self-efficacy, that they are, in many ways, you can see the numbers of disagree, and sometimes are higher than that of agree, don't feel a strong level of self-efficacy, and their psychosocial health is in danger in many ways, is what this data really kind of tells us. And so we want to, once again, we want to see if as they build strength, as they build skill level, as they build knowledge in the areas of physical fitness and physical health, and as they become more physically fit, do we see a change in these students? And does that change then in turn have an impact on their academic progress? This is also the data from the previous semester. And just in average, we can see that the average of the math scores the previous year was around 72%, 77% in ELA, 71% in science, and 78% in social studies. So the student, interesting group that I have is that most of these students were not really high functioning students prior to coming to our weight training course. So it made it almost a perfect situation to see whether or not these numbers can grow. And so once again, the data for how their academic progress is going so far, and their total data towards the end has not been collected yet, but this is what we hope to compare with that data. So the implementation, again, we kind of explained a little bit already. We went through a certain amount of research analysis, obviously looking at both the literature and what the experts say about self-efficacy. But for our particular students, we looked at their prior academic performance. Their grades were recorded, as you saw there, as a mean score. And then students were given the survey to attempt to gauge their level of self-efficacy and psychosocial health. And the forms, the questions were all formed and based on the strength and self-efficacy scale that is so famous by these particular researchers. And you can see the reference there to the questions. Additionally, we had to put together our class and the way that our class would run, and we wanted to make sure that we put together a class that would not destroy our data, which means we needed to be able to collect strength data. We needed to be able to assess students' growth in the course, because if they're not making growth in the course and they're not getting stronger and they're not getting the benefits that the course provides, it's really hard to see whether or not that is having an impact on their level of self-efficacy and subsequently an impact on their academic progress. So we also put together an implementation of our strength cycle, how we would collect data, how we would assess the students, what kind of feedback we would give them, how we would give them feedback. And then we gave surveys again in the middle of the cycles of those strength cycles, and then we will give it again at the end. And then our data analysis will take place in May towards the end of the semester. So for assessments, we use those three forms of assessment. We assess through observation and direct instructional feedback, meaning we have to watch the kids every single day, watch our students, give them feedback, whether or not they're using the right technique, whether or not they're using the proper safety protocols, whether or not they are doing the things necessary in order to benefit from the course, and give them direct feedback, on time, immediate feedback to those students. A deliberate attempt to correct technique, performance, and effort that goes hand in hand with that level of formative assessment. And then subsequently, we also have to be able to measure whether or not they're mastering the standard. And we do that bi-weekly with a rubric assessment that is also going to be located in the appendix of our paper. And then we subsequently, at the end of each strength cycle, which each strength cycle is subsequently 6 weeks, we give them a lifting test where we test their lifting technique as well as their strength development. Are they getting stronger? We see whether or not they are physically getting stronger and physically and getting more physically fit as the class goes on. So those core lifts consist of the bench press, the squat, and the power clean. And so we give written feedback from our rubric assessments, and then we're able to give this kind of result satisfaction. The students are able to get this result satisfaction once they see those numbers. It's really exciting for kids to get to their core lifts and see their numbers shoot up and get stronger. See kids go from 115-pound bench press to 150-pound bench press and see that level of satisfaction with them. And also being able to recognize those students publicly, and also and really try to be able to gauge their level of self-efficacy from that. But using that, providing recognition, as well as creating praise for the students. So that's a big part and a big piece of the puzzle in regards to our study, but as well as just weightlifting in general. So this is just a little bit of a breakdown of how we developed our cycles. Our first cycle, we take the first 2 standards. As I mentioned, we have 5 major standards in weightlifting. And in our first cycle, we focus in on these 2 standards, that the student will demonstrate competency in a variety of motor skill patterns. And then also that the student will apply the knowledge of concepts, principles, and strategies and tactics related to movement. These are the learning intentions that coincide with those standards. Essentially, we take 2 learning intentions, they become the learning intention for 2 or 3 days, and then we move on to the next intentions, just to give a centralized focus for the students for that particular day or that collection of days. In the second cycle, we do the same thing, except now we are focused in on the last 3 standards of the course, as well as the subsequent learning intentions that coincide with those standards. We also continue to collect data. This is the data from the first cycle that in which we implemented. And we can see here, this is the rubric data. So this is the data that's collected on standard mastery. And we can see that about 78% of the kids are doing pretty good with that after the first cycle. This is their lifting technique at the end of the first cycle, how well they are able to conduct the lifts both as well as properly as well and safely. And so we were still struggling with that a little bit in the beginning of in the first cycle. And then the lifting technique assessment for the second cycle, we can see how well they did. This is the rubric data. We can see we saw a huge change in the second 6 weeks for rubric data. They were much, much, much better. You see they're improving. Even in their lifting technique, you can see how much they improved. They went to 91% of our students are doing what they're supposed to do on a consistent basis in regards to that. And then their strength development. This is the data from both the first as well as the second cycle. And it was actually exactly the same. 90% of our students are getting stronger. I mean, just doing an outstanding job of working every day and building strength. And that was the exact same for both cycles. So we can see that the course and the design of the course is going pretty well. Students are going from one level to the next level. And so that's a big piece of us being able to analyze these students' self-efficacy, because once again, if they are not having success in weight training, it's going to be really hard to gauge whether or not they are true, that progress in weight training is having an impact on their level of self-efficacy, and then whether or not that there is any connection between that and their academic progress. So that pretty much is the implementation and what we are doing to try and answer our questions. Of course, we're still in the process of doing that. We have not finished our third cycle, our last cycle of training, nor have we collected the final data of the course. So data analysis is still being done. to really see what our final results will be and whether or not our students are feeling this level of empowerment and this level of psychosocial health and self-efficacy, and whether or not that is having an impact on their overall academic progress. So the data analysis is still yet to be done, considering we haven't collected our final data. These are references to our literature reviews, as well as other references to our learning. And that is all we have today. This is kind of our implementation of what we've done so far in the course. Thank you for listening, and have a good night.